What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Horror Fan 88 channel. I am back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about, in my opinion, my top 10 underrated horror sequels. A few things that I've done with this list ahead of time. One, these are in no particular order, so I didn't really feel like doing number 9, 8, 7, 6. And two, I wanted to give a chance for some other horror sequels to shine. So in this video, you will not be seeing any of the big horror franchises. So no Halloween, Nightmare Friday, Texas Chainsaw, Chucky, none of that. The purpose of this video is just to, show what I think are some underrated sequels, and also to give some good recommendations if you're interested in them or you didn't even know about them. So that's pretty much my goal with this video. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and get started. Coming up first, this film is super underrated, I think, and that is Psycho 2 from 1983. One thing to follow up Psycho, one of the greatest horror films. To do it 22 years later was a big thing, and if I'm being completely honest, as much as I love the original, when I am in the mood to watch a Psycho movie, 9 times out of 10 I will grab Psycho 2. I just think that it's a really good story. Norman Bates is released, and he's actually trying to live a normal life, and I think Anthony Perkins delivers an excellent performance in this movie. And of course you have returning characters who are trying to get him sent back because of what he did in the original. And it's a really cool murder mystery as well, because these murders start happening again, but even Norman himself is questioning if he is doing them or not. And it's just a really interesting movie. I think it's really cool. Lots of beautiful shots in this movie. Just really interesting altogether. So Psycho 2, without a doubt, I think is highly underrated. Even Psycho 3. Psycho 3 is more of a traditional slasher. It's still very entertaining, but this is definitely the best sequel in my opinion. So Psycho 2, it is awesome. Also, these movies are just kind of all over the place with genres and everything. But coming up next, Sleepaway Camp 2. So the original Sleepaway Camp is definitely one of my favorite 80s slashers. And this is too, in a sense, because it's very different than the first one. The first one, you had Felissa Rose as Angela. She was very to herself. She kind of stared blankly, and it just looked creepy. Of course, she got picked on, and you really felt bad for her character. And then in this movie, Angela is now played by Pamela Springsteen, and she's much more energetic, like, "Hello, happy campers," and she'll sing songs and very invested in the camp. So it's a big change up. But the thing is, this is more of the fun 80s slasher in a sense, where, they'll poke fun at other slashers. As you can see on the cover, you have a weird hockey mask and a Freddy glove. At one point, she even kind of dresses up like Leatherface. A great soundtrack too, lots of rock and metal, so I can definitely get down with that. So overall, an extremely fun sequel that I do watch a lot. And the thing about 2 and 3 is that they were shot back to back, and they're very short movies. Both of them barely even reaching an hour and a half. So if you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. The next up here, this film holds a very special place in my heart. Night of the Demons 2. Now, the original Night of the Demons is in my top 5 favorites. It's one that is one of my earliest horror memories I had from growing up as a young horror fan. And this film here, at the time, just finding out that there were sequels was a big thing. It made me extremely excited. And this movie's so much fun. Once again, set on Halloween night. You have Amelia Kincaid back as Angela, the main demon. And I just love the cast of this movie. The characters are all fun. There's no character that I really was just like, "Ugh, get out of here." I think that's cool. Great soundtrack. Let me explain something. When I first saw this movie, maybe 14, 15 years ago, I've been a metalhead pretty much my entire life, and this movie was the first time that I had ever heard death metal. The 2 Morbid Angel songs that play on here, Rapture and Vengeance Is Mine. And when I first heard that, I was like, what is that? And of course now, I'm a massive death metal fan. Morbid Angel is in my favorite bands. So I can thank this movie for showing me that. Great effects, once again, lots of blood, cool stuff. So Night of the Demons 2, lots of fun. Check it out if you haven't. Night of the Demons 3 is more low budget. But I guess it's still fun in a sense. Next up, we have a good old Hammer horror film, Frankenstein Created Woman, with the great Peter Cushing. Why I chose this one is because I love the Hammer Frankensteins, and I think that this one just did something different. This time they do this kind of put a soul into the main victim, and it just kind of feels different than the other ones of just creating a monster and it being a huge monster with like, This time it's a woman, Christina, and they put the soul of someone into her, and it kind of feels like a slasher movie in a sense. I've watched this movie twice, and I just really got entertained by it. So, without a doubt, Frankenstein Created Woman, I think, is the most underrated of the Hammer Frankenstein films. Peter Cushing still delivering a great performance as well. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Hammer horror as well. Coming up next, we have Fright Night Part 2. So much like Night of the Demons, the original Fright Night is in my top 5, and I find this sequel to be extremely fun and entertaining. It's more dark in a sense. This was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and this one has more of a gothic feel to it, almost like castles and everything. It just has that feel. I love that they brought back Charlie Brewster and Peter Vincent, once again played by William Ragsdale and Roddy McDowall. Really like the story this time. And, the vampire effects still look pretty cool. So, yeah. And while I think that it's not as good as the original, I still think that it is a fun sequel. And I know this one isn't for everybody, because it can kind of be more slow than the original. But it's still very entertaining and a great fun time. So, yeah, we never got a part 3. Only 2 remakes after this. But yeah, Fright Night Part 2, whole lot of fun. Next up, Scars of Dracula, yet another Hammer horror film. As far as the Hammer stuff, the Hammer Dracula stuff is my favorite. Christopher Lee as Dracula is just awesome. And I do think this is the most underrated of the Dracula films. This time you get much more Dracula. He talks much more. There's even an interesting scene where you see Dracula stab someone to death, which is very interesting. He just rips a curtain back, has a knife, and just starts stabbing. Always thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, Peter Cushing is not in this one as Van Helsing. I know, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the one with the kind of cheesy looking bad effects. But other than that, very entertaining film. There's a whole bunch of Hammer Dracula films, and I find that this is one that I tend to revisit a lot. The original Dracula from 1958, Horror of Dracula, still my favorite of the Hammer ones. But anyway, Scars of Dracula. Next up, we have Amityville 2, The Possession. So I am not a massive fan of the Amityville franchise in general. As big of a horror fan as I am, there are still some that I haven't seen from then. I just don't feel like putting myself through that. But when it comes to part 2, I find this movie much darker. More things are happening, and I know, in a sense, less is more in a lot of cases. But the original, I was never a huge fan of. I felt like it was just a little bit too slow, and really not a lot happened at all. And, I know that could just be, it's what you don't see is scarier. But this one's much more of a possession movie. It kind of is somewhat similar to the real events that happen. And, yeah, it's just an interesting movie. It's kind of another Exorcist type thing. But anyway, I enjoyed this movie. Next up, we have Gate 2. So I am a huge fan of the original The Gate from 1987. It's a good film I watched growing up. It's a PG-13 horror movie. But the second one is a whole lot of fun as well. It brings back the friend character Terry from the first one, and now he is your main character here. He's more of a teenager now and practicing demonology and everything. So this one is rated R, but it could have easily been PG-13. Because, these movies are not bloody, gory, Evil Dead type demon movies. But this one's very entertaining. There's a scene where they capture one of the little demon minions, and they start, asking for wishes and they get their wishes, and then the next day all of their wishes turn to literal crap. Like if they wish for a nice car, the next day it's a pile of crap in the driveway. It's wacky, but fun, stop motion effects, creature designs, and everything. So without a doubt, The Gate 2 is a fun sequel. It's not like pure horror that's gonna terrify somebody, but it's just fun. Next up, we have Return of the Living Dead 3. Now, I could have easily put part 2 on here as well because I find that movie to be very fun as well. But something about part 3 I really enjoy. It's just the story in general. This is kind of a love story in a way. You have your two main characters, they're really in love, and they accidentally have a motorcycle accident, and she flies off, hits a pole, and dies. So then your main character, of course, his dad works at a facility where, in the original, the 2,4,5 trioxin barrels, she gets hit with the gas and revives. But she doesn't immediately turn into a zombie. It's kind of like that slow transition where as the movie goes on, she gets more hungry for brains and she starts mutilating herself, like shoving glass through herself. Very crazy. Once again, really cool effects with like the barrel monsters and the containers or whatever. So yeah, I dig this movie a lot. Still love part 2 as well, but I think overall as a sequel, the third one is really good. I think I may have seen the two sci-fi sequels once and never watched them again. I think they were Return of the Living Dead, Necropolis, and Rave to the Grave. Two sci-fi original movies. I watched them once, didn't watch them again. And finally for this list, Bride of Reanimator. Once again, the original Reanimator in my top 5. I just love fun, cheesy 80s horror movies. And this one, whole lot of fun. Jeffrey Combs is in my top 2 actors. I just love everything that I've seen him in. And, this movie's much more special effects heavy. There's tons of just things that are like, what the hell? But yeah, you get Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott, David Gale back. You get Kathleen Kinmont as your Bride of Reanimator. And I really, really dug this movie. It's a fun sequel. Tons of gore and blood. It's getting majorly tongue-tied. It's a fun movie. I really dig it. And yeah, this one was directed by Brian Usna, who also directed Return of the Living Dead 3, as well as Society and other films like that. But this is definitely a good sequel. So, with that being said, that is my top 10 underrated horror sequels. Like I said, I could easily make a part 2 to this and include many more, but I guess the question I will ask for you in the comments is, what do you think is your favorite underrated sequel, or just one that you find is just extremely underrated and not talked about a whole lot? Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know if you think it's pretty cool and interesting. But with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed it, so stay tuned for more. I will see you on the next one. Peace.